Which hero in the MCU do you think makes the most overall mistakes? Hey, it's hard to be a hero all the time, and even though they ultimately save the day at the end, they're never going to be perfect. I think you can make the case that Spider-Man has made the most mistakes, and though he always ends up fixing them, it's still an alarming amount. I mean, I get it, he's a teenager with a puppy dog spirit, so of course he's going to make more mistakes than his elders. And sorry, Peter, I don't mean to rub it in, but your mistakes are fun to talk about. Join me today as I break down Spidey's biggest mistakes in the MCU. What did he do and what could he have done differently? Let's discuss. The first humongous mistake that I want to talk about is how Peter handed over Edith to Mysterio. On the surface, this is probably the biggest slip-up that Peter could possibly make. Peter handed over some of the most devastating weaponry on the planet to the bad guy willingly. Like, it wasn't one of those classic good guy scenarios where the villain is threatening to hurt innocent people, so the good guy gives up the valuable piece of tech. Nope, Peter not only handed over the Edith tech to Mysterio, but he did so thinking it was the most heroic and best possible choice to make. But there's a lot of factors that go into this mistake. For one, Mysterio is really convincing. Like, most of us were sure that Mysterio was going to be the villain of the movie ever since he was announced, and although everyone on the film side was swearing he wasn't the bad guy, and actually was this multiversal soldier, we all sorta knew better. But even with that knowledge that Mysterio is the master of illusion, Jake Gyllenhaal is so convincing as a good guy that there was always that small sliver of doubt. To be honest, I was thinking Marvel was doing a double bluff and about to pull off a genius swerve. Like, imagine if they put Mysterio in the movie and said he was this superhero from another universe, and then all of us comic-savvy people were like, oh yeah, he definitely is the bad guy. And then it turned out he was exactly who he said he was? We would have been shocked. But they didn't do that, and we were left with a highly convincing and manipulative villain who had a whole team of disgruntled Stark employees on his side. And let's talk about Tony's role in this mistake for a second, because I don't think this should all fall on Peter. Like, when Peter is sitting in that bar with Mysterio right before giving the glasses away, he very reasonably comes to the conclusion that Tony didn't actually want Peter to have the glasses, but rather help find the next replacement for the glasses and to help search for the new Iron Man. And although it's sad that at this point Peter is doubting himself and his abilities, he sorta has a point. What's more likely? That Tony wanted Peter to hold on to the glasses and pass them off to someone else so that Fury wouldn't weaponize them? Or that Tony decided that a 16-year-old kid should be in complete control of devastating and dangerous weaponry? Yeah, the first one makes more sense. But hey, maybe Tony wasn't thinking straight. After all, I actually have no idea when Tony would have decided to leave Edith to Peter. Like, it had to have been after coming up with the time travel plan in order to bring everyone back after believing they were gone forever, but before his demise in the final Endgame battle. That implies he knew Peter would be rescued and that he wouldn't survive, so maybe his emotions were clouding his judgment there. But anyways, all that is to drive home the point that although Peter made a massive mistake here, it wasn't completely his fault. Okay, this video is going to get into some No Way Home spoilers a bit later on. Not quite this entry, but this is just my preemptive warning. Anyways, this entry does talk about events that are easily discernible from the No Way Home trailer, and I am of course talking about Peter's decision to go to Doctor Strange in an attempt to fix his whole secret identity crisis. So to set the scene, Peter is having trouble. Thanks to J. Jonah Jameson's constant attack on Spider-Man and the consistent accusations of being responsible for Mysterio's demise, a lot of New York hates him. His whole life is turned upside down, and what's worse is that his best friends are suffering for it. All three of them are denied entry to MIT, not just because MIT has around a 7% acceptance rate out of over 30,000 applicants per year, I checked, but because the school says they don't want to be involved with the drama around the whole Spider-Man debacle. So what does Peter do? Does he do the smart thing and go to Pepper Potts, widow of MIT's greatest student Tony Stark, and ask for some help? I'd like to say that Peter did this and then Pepper talked to MIT and reminded them that literally their most successful student ever, and the guy responsible for helping save the entire freaking universe, would vouch for Peter and his friends, and then the whole thing blew over. But nope, Peter decided on a whim to go straight to Doctor Strange in order to ask the former Sorcerer Supreme to erase everyone's memories in regards to his secret identity. Yeah, this was a huge mistake. And on top of it, what's worse is how later in the movie, MJ calls Peter out on it, saying next time when he's making a big decision like this, that he should discuss it with her and Ned, and the three of them can discuss whether it's a good idea or not. But also, as much as this is Peter's mistake, this is also on Doctor Strange, who immediately agreed to this spell and didn't try to talk to Peter about the repercussions at all. It's like if Peter went to Doctor Strange and asked, "Hey, Steven, could you send J. Jonah Jameson to a different dimension?" And Doctor Strange just snapped his fingers to make it happen without asking any follow-ups. I'm just saying, there's a reason why there was a vocal minority of people who, after seeing the trailer, questioned whether Doctor Strange was secretly a Skrull, or Mephisto, or Baron Mordo in disguise, because this isn't something any superhero would do without thinking. You want to know why giving Peter E.D.I.T.H was a horrible idea? Well, that's showcased perfectly when Peter mistakenly almost assassinates his classmate Brad Davis. Like, this scene shows how inexperienced Peter Parker really is. He knows that E.D.I.T.H is a powerful weapon system capable of harnessing all of Stark's weaponry. So why in the world, when E.D.I.T.H asks Peter if Brad Davis is a target, does Peter say yes? It's a mistake that almost ruins Peter's whole life. The scene is sort of played for laughs, and Peter has to deal with an annoying Flash and distracting his classmates with the image of baby mountain goats. But like, imagine if Peter didn't stop this in time. He would have had to explain to Nick Fury that he accidentally ordered a drone to take out a fellow teenager because that teenager had a bad photo that he was about to send to the girl Peter liked. Tony Stark's ghost would have been up floating in that big giant iron heap in the sky, awkwardly avoiding eye contact with Black Widow and Quicksilver over why he gave drone capabilities to a teenager. This is one of Peter's biggest mistakes because of how massive the implications were. Okay, I talked about how dumb it was to go to Strange and ask for the spell in the first place when there were a ton of other options, including talking to the school board and appealing his case, but I want to highlight the specific way Peter acted during the casting of the spell and why it's one of his biggest mistakes. Yes, the whole point of this is that Peter is desperate and not really thinking straight, but all I'm saying is when the wizard asks you to stop talking, then you stop talking. Peter was in a world and environment he knew nothing about, and his continuing to ask for people to remember who he was had serious repercussions. And let's not forget the name that caused everything to finally break. Like, Peter was able to alter the spell to have Ned, MJ, and his aunt all remember who he was, and if Peter had just shut up at that moment, I think Strange would have had it under control. But then, even with knowing that things were breaking down, Peter tries to get Strange to alter it one more time by adding Happy Hogan's name onto the list. Jeez, Peter, come on, you can tell Happy again. Like, seriously, what's the worst thing about Happy not knowing who Spider-Man is? That doesn't erase Happy's memories of Spider-Man, and as we saw, it doesn't affect his relationship with Aunt May, so what was the importance? He could have easily just told Happy again that he's Spider-Man, and then everything would have been fine. But no, he tried to push things a bit too far by saying Happy's name, and then go into a monologue about who Happy is, and that was what finally caused the spell to lose control. So remember, Peter's big mistake and his ultimate ending was all because of Happy Hogan. Okay, fine, it wasn't all Happy Hogan, but the final straw for the spell was. Okay, this one is more into No Way Home spoiler territory. It's about the middle of the movie and involves the big emotional character goodbye, so keep in mind, you've been warned. But I guess again, I'm not sure why you would risk watching a video about Spider-Man's biggest mistakes in the MCU without seeing his latest movie, but just in case. Anyway, there comes a point where Peter decides to not send the Sinister Five. No, that doesn't sound right. Ferocious Five? Sure. Peter decides to not send the Ferocious Five back to their universes where some of them would perish. Instead, he wants to save them, and this is probably one of the single greatest decisions he's ever made. Which is unfortunate that immediately after this decision, he makes another big mistake, and that's inviting all the villains back to Happy Hogan's apartment to just sorta hang out and wait around. Like, Peter, Electro literally just said if things don't work, he's going to electrocute everyone. And your next idea is to let him out and hope he's chill? No, Peter, the smarter thing would be to take the villains back almost one by one to the apartment. Or better yet, leave them locked up and just bring them their cure later. But I get it, you needed to have Otto Octavius and Norman Osborn out to help with things, but like, you couldn't take any precautions against the Green Goblin? Like, Peter, you knew that Norman was suffering from some type of split personality, and if the other guy took control, then he'd start smiling that crazy goblin smile. You didn't want to think of a game plan for that? Tie him up except for his hands? Create a fail-safe knockout suit in case he loses control? Anything? No? Just invite him over to hang with all the villains and just hope he doesn't go crazy? Not a great plan. And this mistake did ultimately lead to Peter's greatest loss ever in the MCU, his Aunt May. Okay, this one might be the most controversial mistake because it fits so well with the end of the No Way Home film and gives it a truly emotional finale, but here are some more spoilers. I think it was a big mistake not retelling MJ and Ned who he was at the end. Like, for sure, I get it. Peter's life is dangerous, and in his eyes, he was doing the heroic thing by letting his friends live their own lives away from villains who could do them harm and not be damaged by association with him anymore. And let's be real, if Ned and MJ stuck around Peter long enough, the chances that at least one of them would pull a Gwen Stacy in Amazing Spider-Man 2 would increase after every villain encounter. Peter just wants to keep them safe. But here's the thing, I think this was a mistake for Peter Parker personally. Like, listen to this. This is how the script for No Way Home that was recently released for viewers to enjoy reads. The final line of the script, while Peter is swinging over New York in his new homemade costume, reads, quote, "Soars over the Rockefeller Christmas tree with a newfound sense of freedom. Liberated from having to juggle two lives, Peter Parker is no more, but Spider-Man lives on." And while that's kind of nice, it's also sort of tragic. If Peter no longer has any ties to his Peter Parker life, then he risks losing himself and his secret identity. He's still only a teenager. He needs a life outside of the suit, and that's where MJ and Ned come into play. This is very similar to what Captain America was struggling with in The Winter Soldier, as he didn't have time for any sort of personal life or connection. And we all know how that turned out. He eventually chose love and his personal life over being a superhero. And let's be real, from a storytelling perspective, no way MJ and Ned are out of Peter's life, and I expect this all to be fixed in the next movie. In fact, I still stand by the idea that the next Spider-Man film will see how MJ and Ned's lives are a little worse without Spider-Man involved, maybe leading to Ned becoming the Hobgoblin, forcing Spider-Man to step in to help them regain their memories. I think that makes for a very exciting movie, but also will ultimately undermine the decision made at the end of No Way Home. You know what? It's almost exactly like The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. In The Dark Knight, Batman makes the very noble decision to be the bad guy to save Harvey Dent's reputation, and it's a fantastic ending. But then The Dark Knight Rises is all about how that single decision was probably the worst decision imaginable, and everyone was miserable because of it. I hope the next Spider-Man movie avoids that pratfall. Peter made perhaps the biggest teenager mistake he could make in Homecoming when he decided to disable his new suit's training wheels protocol. He wanted to act older than he was. Like, to be fair, I think Tony Stark naming this the training wheels protocol probably only pushed Peter to rebel and try to prove himself more. Like, if Stark wasn't as snarky and named it like Level 1 or Phase 1 protocol, then Peter might have left that protocol in place. Instead, he chose to rebel against his mentor and give himself abilities he wasn't quite ready for yet. Big mistake. Of course, again, I don't know why Stark put all that stuff in this suit instead of waiting to give Peter another suit later with all the upgrades, but hey, maybe Stark just doesn't like building excess suits for no reason, right? Right? Spider-Man's eagerness to prove himself almost got a lot of people hurt in Homecoming. After being basically told to stand down, Peter follows Vulture, Shocker, and Pre-Scorpion onto the ferry in order to try and stop them. But the situation gets out of control with the bad guys escaping and the ferry almost splitting apart and hurting all the innocent people on board. It's only thanks to Iron Man's assistance that Peter's able to save everyone on the boat. But Peter definitely jumped the gun here. Iron Man was monitoring the whole exchange and was even the reason why the FBI were on that boat to begin with. There was a plan in place to capture all these criminals, but thanks to Spidey's interference, they all got away. But hey, on the bright side, if Peter didn't make a mistake here and all the bad guys were captured, then this movie would have been a lot shorter. Peter just wanted a bit of a break in Far From Home, and that's understandable given he's just a teenager who went through a major traumatic event with the loss of Iron Man, but still, you don't ghost Nick Fury. He's the one guy whose calls you take. Peter desperately trying to avoid responsibility and get with MJ is nice and funny, but if Nick Fury, one of the world's greatest super spies, is trying to reach you, then you can't just avoid him. Sorry, Peter, I don't know if you've heard, but with great power comes great responsibility. Who knows how the movie would have been different if Peter just answered Nick Fury's first phone call? Would he have been able to figure out Mysterio was evil a bit earlier? I think it's a possibility. If this last mistake was a J. Jonah Jameson headline, it would read, "Spider-Man Menace tries to blow up historical landmark." And that's not super accurate, but also, it kind of is Peter's fault. Yes, there's no way Peter could have known that the special piece of alien tech he asked Ned to look after was actually a big bomb that would explode when exposed to radiation, but it was still a mistake to carry around such a mysterious piece of weaponry like that. And this decision to task Ned with guarding it almost took out Peter's whole high school class, while also almost destroying the Washington Monument. Yes, it's a very heroic rescue, but it also stemmed from a situation Peter caused, so it's kind of a wash. Okay, I don't mean to be too harsh here, so how about we all list some of Peter's biggest wins in the MCU? Saving the Vulture's life, saving all the villains in No Way Home, helping rescue Doctor Strange from Squidward after he was taken to space? Say what you will, but Peter does have the heart of a hero, and that's what makes him so likable.